Hey everyone, I don't even know where to start. I never thought I'd be the guy posting here, but life has a way of blindsiding you. My name's Henry, and my wife Katie is the reason I'm here. I've never been into gambling. Not once. My uncle was a gambler, and I watched him destroy everything: his savings, his relationships, even his health. I swore I'd never go down that road. Katie, on the other hand, was different. She was competitive, always had to win, always had to be the best. At first, it was harmless. Board games, little bets on TV shows, even fantasy football. But then she got into poker. It started as a casual thing, college friends getting together once a month to play, drink, and talk trash. I never joined. Didn't like the idea of throwing money away for a game, even if it was just a few bucks. But Katie? She got hooked. She started reading strategy books, watching tournaments, and practicing online. And of course winning. At first, I didn't mind. It was her hobby. She was good at it. But over time, it became an obsession. She'd skip date nights for poker. She'd talk about her poker family more than our actual family. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, and she'd be at the kitchen table, dealing out hands to herself, whispering calculations under her breath. I should have seen the warning signs. Should have said something. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just another poker night, at least, that's what I thought. Katie left, promising she wouldn't be too late. I stayed home, watched a movie, and went to bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a text from her. Come get me. Now. No explanation. No details. Just that. My stomach dropped. I threw on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and drove to Mark's place, one of the guys in her poker group. I never liked Mark. Arrogant, sleazy, always bragging about his money. Something about the way he looked at Katie never sat right with me. I got there, and the moment I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The room was silent. Tense. Katie was standing by the table, arms crossed, looking furious but also embarrassed. And Mark? Mark was grinning like he had just won the lottery. Looks like we got ourselves a sore loser, he said, chuckling. I looked at Katie. What happened? She didn't answer. One of the other guys, Jason I think, shifted uncomfortably and muttered, she lost a big hand. Okay. So what? It's poker. Losing is part of the game. Then Mark said it. Your wife made a bet she couldn't cover. And now she's trying to back out. I stared at him. Then at Katie. What did you bet? She still wouldn't look at me. Mark's grin widened. She put herself in the pot. The room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. My hands clenched into fists. The hell does that mean? Means she agreed to spend the night with the winner, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, arms stretched like he was the king of the damn castle. And guess who won? I felt something snap inside me. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Katie still wouldn't look at me. Her arms were crossed, her jaw clenched. I could see the anger in her face, but there was something else underneath it, shame. Maybe fear. Mark sat there, acting like this was some joke. Like this was just another hand of cards, just another night. You're messing with me, I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Nope, Mark said, still grinning. Your wife made a bet, and she lost. She doesn't want to pay up. That's bad gambling etiquette. I turned to Katie. Tell me this isn't real. Her nostrils flared, and she finally spoke, her voice tight. It was just a stupid bet. I didn't think I'd lose. Didn't think. My stomach turned. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. So what? You were just gonna go through with it? Just let this happen. Of course not, she snapped. I was bluffing. I thought I had the best hand. Mark let out a laugh. Well, you didn't. I saw red. I lunged at him, but before I could reach him, two guys grabbed me, Jason and Chris. They were Katie's college buddies, but I guess they weren't my buddies. They held me back, and Mark just sat there, smug as ever. Whoa, Mark said, holding up his hands like I was the one being unreasonable. No need for violence, man. A bet's a bet. If she doesn't want to follow through, that's on her. But don't act like I forced her into it. Let me go, I growled, struggling against Jason and Chris. Katie stepped in, eyes blazing. Enough. This is ridiculous. I'm not doing anything, and Henry is taking me home. End of story. Mark scoffed. Then you shouldn't have made the bet. Jason and Chris finally let me go, and I stepped back, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I didn't trust myself to say anything else. If I did, I knew I'd lose it completely. Katie grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. I followed. As we stepped outside, I could still hear Mark laughing behind us. We didn't talk on the drive home. She just stared out the window, arms crossed, tapping her foot against the floor mat. I was gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing. This wasn't just some stupid bet. This was our marriage. Finally, I broke the silence. What were you thinking? She let out a short, bitter laugh. I was thinking I'd win. You bet yourself, Katie. I almost yelled. What kind of person does that? She turned to me, her face twisted in anger. I was winning all night. I had a straight flush, Henry. You don't understand poker. Mark was bluffing the whole damn game. I thought I had him. Yeah? Well, you didn't. Yeah, no kidding, she snapped. I shook my head. You didn't even tell me. You didn't text me before the bet. You only called me when you lost. She rolled her eyes. Obviously, Henry. What was I supposed to do? Call you and say, hey honey, just letting you know I'm betting myself in a poker game, but don't worry, I'm totally gonna win. I gritted my teeth. So you admit it, you knew it was messed up before you even did it. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. It got out of hand, okay? I didn't think it through. It was just, Mark was pushing me, and I wasn't gonna let him punk me at my own game. I was on a streak. A streak? You were gambling with our marriage, Katie. She flinched, just a little, and looked away. I would never have gone through with it, she muttered. How do I know that? She didn't answer. Silence again. I pulled into our driveway, shut off the engine, and just sat there, staring at my hands. My heart was still hammering. Katie let out a sigh. Look, I get it. You're mad. But nothing happened, okay? I lost a hand, I got up, and I walked away. That's it. I turned to her, my jaw tight. And what if I hadn't shown up? What if Mark decided to collect? Her face darkened. I would have handled it. I scoffed. Oh yeah? Like you handled not making the bet in the first place. She exhaled loudly and threw open the car door. I'm done talking about this. She got out and stomped toward the house. I sat there for a long time before finally following her inside. I knew then. Something was broken between us. And I didn't think it could be fixed. The house felt different when I walked in. Same walls, same furniture, same pictures of us smiling from better days. But everything had changed. Katie was already in the bedroom, yanking off her earrings, throwing them onto the dresser like she wanted to break something. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You're just gonna act like this isn't a big deal? She didn't look at me. I already said it was stupid, Henry. What else do you want? I want to know what really happened. She spun around, glaring. I told you what happened. I shook my head. No. You told me your version of it. But something doesn't add up. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, so now I'm lying? I stepped into the room. You were alone with Mark before you called me, weren't you? She hesitated, just for a second. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. What happened, Katie? My voice was quieter now. Nothing. Don't do that. She rolled her eyes. Henry, I lost the hand. Mark made some gross comments, and I shut it down. That's it. I studied her face. I'd known Katie for years. I knew her tells, how she bit the inside of her cheek when she was nervous, how she looked down when she wasn't being honest. She was looking down. Mark didn't just say things, did he? She scoffed. Oh my God, Henry, drop it. I took a step closer. Tell me the truth. Her fingers curled into fists. I am telling you the truth. But her voice was too sharp. Defensive. I swallowed hard. Did he touch you? Silence. Her breathing was uneven now. She turned away, facing the dresser. Katie, I said, stepping closer. Did he? No, she snapped, spinning back around. He didn't touch me. I told him I wasn't serious about the bet, and that was the end of it. I wanted to believe her. I really, really did. But something about the way she was acting, the tension in her shoulders, the way she was gripping the edge of the dresser like it was the only thing keeping her standing, told me I wasn't getting the full story. Then why did you wait so long to call me? I asked. She blinked. What? You texted me at 2 a.m. But the game ended before that, didn't it? Why'd you stay? She hesitated again. A fraction of a second too long. My stomach clenched. You stayed with him, I said. It wasn't a question. She let out a harsh breath. Not like that. I was trying to fix things, okay? Trying to smooth things over so it didn't get worse. Worse. I echoed. Worse than you betting yourself in a poker game? Worse than him thinking he could collect. Yes, she snapped. If I just stormed out, it would have been a thing, Henry. You don't understand how these games work. If you cause a scene, you don't get invited back. And She stopped. And there it was. I exhaled slowly, nodding. That's what this is really about. She turned pale. What? You weren't worried about us. You weren't worried about what Mark would do to you. I took another step closer, lowering my voice. You were worried about getting kicked out of your little poker group. Her mouth opened, then closed. I felt something crack inside me. I let out a short, bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. Unbelievable. You're twisting this, she shouted. I didn't want to stay, okay? But I had to. You had to. My voice was sharper now. No, Katie. You chose to. You chose poker over our marriage. You chose to stay in a room with a guy who thought he won you. She turned red. That's not. Do you even hear yourself? I cut her off. What if I wasn't home? What if I didn't come pick you up? Would you have stayed the night just to keep your place at the table? She looked like I had slapped her. And then, finally, I saw it. The realization. The horror. She staggered back a step, gripping the edge of the dresser. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked out. Henry, she started. But I didn't stop. I went straight to the couch, sat down, and stared at the wall. Because I knew. After everything, after all the excuses, the lies, the justifications, I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a stranger. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the couch, staring at nothing, my mind too loud to shut off. Katie stayed in the bedroom. I could hear her pacing, stopping, then pacing again. A few times she walked to the doorway, lingered like she wanted to say something, but then turned back. She knew. She knew I wasn't letting this go. At some point, I checked my phone. 4:13 a.m. No messages, no calls. Nothing from Jason, Chris, or even Mark. Like they were waiting, like they already knew what had happened and just wanted to see what I'd do next. By the time the sun started coming up, I felt like a ghost, just sitting there, too tired to move but too wired to sleep. At 6 a.m., I heard Katie crawl into bed. I still didn't move. I grabbed my keys and left. Didn't know where I was going, just let the car take me somewhere familiar. Ended up at a diner down the street, the same one Katie and I used to go to every Sunday when we were first married, back when we actually liked each other, back when I still knew who she was. I ordered coffee, black. Stared out the window. My phone buzzed. Katie, where are you? I ignored it. Katie, Henry, please. We need to talk. We already talked. She lied. I saw it. Katie, I messed up, okay? But nothing happened. You know that, right? I gritted my teeth, then before I could stop myself, I typed. Me, did you stay alone with Mark after the game? She answered almost instantly. Katie, I already told you. I turned my phone off. I wasn't doing this over text. I needed answers, real ones, and I knew exactly where to get them. Jason lived across town in a cramped apartment, and I knew he'd be home. He worked late shifts and usually slept in. I banged on his door until I heard movement. When he opened up, his face went pale. Henry, hey man. I pushed past him, stepping inside. Tell me what really happened last night. Jason rubbed his face. Look, dude, I don't want to get in the middle of. You're already in the middle, I snapped. So tell me. What happened after Katie lost? He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Jason. He exhaled sharply. All right. Yeah. She stayed after the game. But, not for long. Maybe like 30 minutes? I don't know, man, I was wasted. Why? She was talking to Mark. My stomach dropped. About what? Jason looked even more uncomfortable now. I wasn't listening. It was late, I was drunk, I just remember them off to the side, talking. She looked pissed, he looked smug, same old Mark, you know. I knew. And now, I knew Katie had lied straight to my face. I drove home in a fog. Jason's words kept circling in my head, over and over. She stayed. She talked to Mark. She looked pissed, he looked smug. Katie had told me she left right away. That she shut it down and called me the second the game ended. But that wasn't true. She stayed behind. Alone. With Mark. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My pulse was hammering. The air inside the car felt thick, suffocating. I had walked into that poker night thinking I had a wife I could trust. Now, I wasn't sure if I even knew who she was anymore. I finally got out and stepped inside the house. The second I shut the door, Katie appeared in the hallway, like she'd been waiting for me. Her hair was a mess, her eyes puffy from either sleep or crying. Maybe both. Where were you? She asked. I ignored her and walked past, heading straight for the kitchen. I needed water. Or maybe a moment to gather my thoughts before I did something I'd regret. Henry, she said again, following me. Where did you go? I set my keys on the counter, turned around, and leveled my eyes at her. I went to see Jason. Her face froze. I saw the exact moment the panic hit. The way her hands twitched slightly at her sides, the way her lips parted like she was scrambling for words. You, she forced a laugh, but it came out shaky. Why would you do that? I took a step forward. Because I wanted the truth. She swallowed. I already told you the truth. No, I said. You told me your version of the truth. But Jason? He told me what really happened. Katie's expression flickered, just for a second. But I caught it. She shook her head, crossing her arms. I don't know what he said, but... You stayed, I cut in. You didn't leave right after the game like you told me. You were alone with Mark. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped even closer, lowering my voice. What happened? She exhaled sharply, like she was irritated, like I was the one making this difficult. It wasn't a big deal, Henry. Mark wanted to talk, okay? He was being a jerk, rubbing it in my face that I lost, and I was trying to shut him up. That's it. Why didn't you tell me? She rolled her eyes. Because I knew you'd react like this. Like what? Like a husband who just found out his wife lied to him. Henry, it wasn't a lie, she snapped. I was mad. I needed to cool off before I called you. What difference does it make if I stayed 10 minutes or 30? I stared at her. It makes a difference because Mark isn't the kind of guy you have any kind of private conversation with. And you know that. She looked away. Nothing happened. I let out a cold laugh. Yeah? And why should I believe you? She flinched. For a long moment, we just stood there. The silence between us was different now. Heavier. It wasn't just about the poker game anymore. It was about everything. Every little moment I had ignored. Every time she put poker first. Every time she dismissed my concerns. Every time she looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Something between us had cracked. And I didn't know if it could be put back together. Katie finally spoke, her voice quieter now. What do you want me to say? I met her gaze. I want the truth. She hesitated. Then, just like that, she shook her head. I already told you. That was it. That was the moment I knew. Katie wasn't going to tell me the full truth. Not now. Maybe not ever. And if I wanted to find out the rest, I was going to have to get it myself. I didn't argue with her. Didn't yell. Didn't push for more answers. I just walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and left. She called after me, but I ignored her. I needed space. Needed to think. My head was spinning, my stomach twisted up so bad I thought I'd throw up. She was hiding something. Jason told me she stayed behind. Alone with Mark. But for what? Just to argue? Just to cool off like she claimed? No. I knew Katie. She was competitive, reckless when it came to winning, but she wasn't stupid. She wouldn't stay behind unless there was a reason. And Mark, smug, arrogant Mark, he knew something. I saw it on his face that night. The way he leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed while I was ready to tear him apart. He wasn't just messing with me. He believed Katie owed him something. And she hadn't told me the full reason why. I drove without a destination, just letting the roads take me somewhere while I tried to think. Eventually, I found myself in front of another house. Smaller, less expensive, but familiar. Mary and Allison's place. Mary was Jason's wife. Allison was Chris's. They were both there that night. Neither of them had said a word when things went down. They just stood there watching, like it wasn't their business. Well, now it was. I parked and walked up to the door. Rang the bell. A few seconds later, Mary opened it, still in pajamas, her hair messy like she'd just woken up. When she saw me, her expression shifted from surprise to guilt. She knew why I was here. "Henry," she said carefully. "It's early. I need answers," I said flatly. She glanced behind her, then stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "Look, don't lie to me." My voice came out harder than I intended, but I didn't care. "You saw what happened. You saw Katie lose that bet. And you stood there while Mark acted like she was some prize to be collected." Mary looked away, crossing her arms. I didn't know what to do. "You could have said something." She flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" "Because Katie's telling me one thing, Jason's telling me another, and I know for a fact that someone is lying." Mary exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "I don't know the whole story, Henry. But I know Katie and Mark were alone for a while. And when she finally left, she looked different." A chill ran down my spine. "Different how?" Mary hesitated. Like she was rattled. Like something happened that she didn't want to talk about. I felt my jaw tighten. I had spent all night wondering if I was crazy for not trusting Katie. If I was reading too much into things. If I was making this bigger than it was. But now? Now I was sure. Something happened between Katie and Mark. And I was going to find out exactly what it was. I left Mary's house without another word. My chest was tight, my hands clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. Katie had lied. Jason had hesitated. And now Mary, someone who had no reason to lie, had confirmed what I already knew in my gut. Something happened between Katie and Mark. Something she didn't want to tell me. I wasn't going home yet. Not until I had the full story. I drove straight to Mark's place. His house was exactly what I expected, overly flashy, the kind of place someone buys not because they love it, but because they want to show they can afford it. I slammed my car door shut and marched up to his front door, hammering my fist against it. Nothing. I rang the doorbell, then knocked again, harder this time. Finally, the door swung open. Mark stood there, shirtless, looking like he had just rolled out of bed. His lazy smirk barely lasted a second before he saw the look on my face. "Henry," he said, stretching. "Didn't expect to see you so soon." "What, miss me already?" I didn't say anything. Just stepped forward, forcing him to either move or get shoved back. He moved, chuckling as he let me in. "All right, man, I'll bite," he said, shutting the door behind me. "What's got you all worked up?" I turned to face him, my body rigid. "Tell me what happened after the game." He lifted an eyebrow. "I think you already know." "Not from you." Mark smirked, rubbing his jaw like he was considering whether or not to play with me. "What, Katie didn't give you all the details?" My stomach churned. "What details?" He shrugged, leaning against the counter. "Look, Henry, I don't want to make this worse for you. You're already pissed, and I get it. But you really want to know." I didn't answer. Mark tilted his head slightly, studying me. Then he let out a small laugh. "All right. Here's what happened. Your wife stayed behind after the game. Said she wanted to talk. At first, I thought she was just going to beg me to let it go, but nope, she was mad. Real mad. Started going off about how I was disrespecting her, how I was a sleazy piece of trash, all that. He grinned. I let her yell for a bit. Then I told her she had agreed to the bet. That no one forced her. That she just got cocky and lost. My fists clenched. And then Mark smirked wider. And then she offered me something else instead. I felt the air leave my lungs. I took a step closer. You're lying. Mark just chuckled. Nah man. I'm not. Katie was desperate to make it right, without doing what she owed. So she started negotiating. I swallowed hard. What did she offer? He raised his hands. Relax, I didn't take her up on it. I just found it funny. Your honorable, loyal wife scrambling to offer anything but what she actually owed. What did she offer? Mark held my gaze, waiting just long enough to let the tension build. Then casually he said, a strip game. Just me and her. One hand, double or nothing. I felt something snap inside me. My entire body tensed, every muscle locked in place. She said it was the only thing I was getting, Mark continued. One game. If she won, I'd drop it. If she lost, well, she'd strip for me, piece by piece, till she had nothing left. I didn't remember lunging at him. All I knew was that my fist collided with his face, and suddenly, he was on the ground, groaning. I wasn't done. I grabbed him by the collar, yanked him up, and slammed him against the wall. Did she lose? I growled. Mark coughed, laughing through the pain. Didn't get the chance. She backed out at the last second. I let go of him, so suddenly he stumbled forward. He wiped the blood from his lip, still smirking. That's the wife you're defending, Henry, he said, shaking his head. A woman who was this close to stripping for another man just to save herself from the consequences of her own stupid bet. I stared at him, my breathing ragged, my vision blurred with fury. Then I turned and walked out. I had my answer. Katie had bet herself. She had lost. And instead of just walking away, she had negotiated her way into something just as disgusting. And she had lied to my face about it. My marriage was over. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much, my chest tight with so much anger I thought I might lose it completely. I just sat in my car outside Mark's house, staring blankly at the dashboard, replaying his words over and over. A strip game. Just me and her. One hand, double or nothing. She had stayed. She had negotiated. She had stood there with that man, trying to trade away her dignity instead of just walking out. And then she had come home and lied to my face. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just about the poker game anymore. It wasn't even just about Mark. It was about Katie. About who she really was when things didn't go her way. And I wasn't sure I could ever look at her the same way again. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I forced myself to drive back home. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I needed to face her. To see if she'd finally tell me the truth now that I already knew it. When I walked inside, she was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hands. The second she saw me, she jumped up. Henry, where were you? I shut the door behind me and just looked at her. I was with Mark. Her face went pale. I took a slow step forward. You want to try again? Maybe tell me what actually happened that night. Katie's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She swallowed, taking a step back like she could somehow create space between us and the truth. I let out a short, humorless laugh. He told me everything. About how you stayed with him. About how you tried to make another bet instead of just leaving. About how you were willing to strip for him just to get yourself out of trouble. Her whole body stiffened. I shook my head, my voice flat. You looked me in the eye last night and told me you left right away. That you handled it. That Mark was just being disgusting. You lied to me, Katie. She inhaled sharply. Henry, I raised a hand. Don't. Just tell me one thing. She hesitated. Would you have gone through with it? Her mouth opened and closed. She took another shaky breath, her fingers curling into her sleeves. No, she whispered. I let out a slow exhale, staring at her. Then why did you even consider it? Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, I saw it. Regret. Real regret. But it was too late. I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I was desperate. I wasn't thinking. She let out a choked breath, wiping at her eyes. I didn't want to lose, Henry. I didn't want to feel like a failure. I nodded slowly, running a hand through my hair. So you would have rather humiliate yourself in front of Mark than just admit defeat? She sniffled, looking away. I let the silence sit between us, heavy and suffocating. Then I spoke again, quieter this time. Do you even love me? Her head snapped back toward me, her eyes wide. Of course I do. Henry, this had nothing to do with us. I scoffed. Nothing to do with us? You bet yourself in a poker game. You let some sleazebag think he owned you. You stayed alone with him, making deals behind my back. And then you lied about it. You gambled with our marriage, Katie. She let out a broken sob. I wasn't thinking. No, I said, my voice cold. You were thinking. Just not about me. She was crying now, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt empty. Tired. I don't trust you anymore, I admitted. And I don't think I ever will. Katie's face crumpled, and she took a shaky step toward me. Please, Henry. I'll fix this. I swear. I'll quit poker. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't move. Because deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about poker. This was who she was. And I wasn't sure I could live with that. Katie stood there, waiting for me to say something, anything, but I had nothing left to give. I had spent the last 2 days fighting to understand, fighting to believe her, fighting to find a way to move forward. But now, after everything, after Mark, after Jason, after Mary, I wasn't fighting anymore. I was just done. She took another step toward me. Henry, please, just tell me what to do. I'll fix this. I swear. I stared at her. You can't fix this, Katie. Her face twisted in pain. But I love you. I let out a breath, shaking my head. No, you love winning. And when you lost, you didn't think about me, or our marriage, or what this would do to us. You thought about how to keep playing. She opened her mouth, then shut it. She knew I was right. I swallowed hard, my voice quieter now. I thought I knew who you were. I really did. Her chin trembled, her hands shaking at her sides. Henry, I made a mistake. I got in too deep, I got competitive, I let things spiral. But it didn't mean anything. Mark doesn't mean anything. I exhaled sharply. You still don't get it. She blinked. Get what? That it's not about Mark, I said. It's about you. About the fact that you let yourself go there in the first place. That when things went wrong, your instinct wasn't to walk away, it was to negotiate your way into something worse. Katie was crying harder now, her breaths coming fast and uneven. She shook her head. I wasn't thinking. I cut her off. No, Katie. You were thinking. You were thinking about how to come out on top. And you didn't care what it cost. Her lip quivered, her hands balling into fists. You're acting like I cheated on you. I went still. She must have seen the change in my expression because her face paled instantly. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered, shaking her head. Henry, I didn't cheat. I let out a bitter laugh. Maybe not. But you sure as hell acted like someone who would. Her breath hitched. I turned away, rubbing a hand over my face. I had nothing left to say. Are you leaving? She whispered. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders sagging. Not yet. She looked up, hope flashing in her eyes. Then we can fix this. We can. I shook my head. No. I need time to think. Katie's face fell. She opened her mouth, like she wanted to argue, but stopped herself. Instead, she just nodded, wiping at her face. I turned and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, she spoke again, her voice small. Do you still love me? I froze. For a long moment, I didn't answer. Then finally, I sighed. I don't know. And with that, I walked out. I drove with no destination in mind, just letting the road stretch ahead of me while I tried to process everything. The air in the car felt suffocating, like I was trapped in my own skin. My own life. The life I had built with Katie, the woman I thought I knew, was crumbling beneath me, and I wasn't sure if there was anything left worth saving. Her voice kept playing in my head. "Do you still love me?" And my answer: "I don't know." I didn't even recognize myself anymore. A week ago, I would have laughed if someone told me I'd ever doubt my love for Katie. She was my wife. The person I had built a life with. The woman I had promised forever to. But now? Now I wasn't even sure who she was. I pulled into an empty parking lot outside a strip mall and just sat there, staring at the dashboard. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't angry anymore. Just exhausted. Then my phone buzzed. For a second, I thought it was Katie. I almost didn't check. But when I glanced at the screen, it wasn't her. It was Allison. "Allison, hey. Can we talk?" I frowned. Out of everyone from the poker group, Allison had been the quietest that night. She had just watched it all unfold, standing beside Mary, saying nothing. I hadn't even thought about her since. I hesitated, then typed back. "Me, what do you want to talk about?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, finally, "Allison, I know what happened. I should have spoken up sooner. I feel awful about it." I exhaled sharply, leaning back in my seat. "Me, if you know something I don't, say it now." Another pause. Then, "Allison, can you meet me? I think it'll be easier to explain in person." I hesitated. My gut told me not to get sucked further into this mess, but at this point, what did I have to lose? "Me, where?" She sent me the address of a small cafe across town. I didn't think twice. I started the car and drove. Allison was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked nervous, her fingers tapping restlessly against the table. When she saw me, she gave a tight smile. "Hey." I slid into the seat across from her. "Talk." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Henry, I should have said something sooner. I just didn't know how." "Say what?" I pressed. She bit her lip, hesitated, then finally spoke. "Mark and Katie. That wasn't the first time something like this happened." The words hit me like a gut punch. My entire body went cold. "What?" She swallowed hard. "It was never like that," she added quickly. "But this isn't the first time Katie has crossed lines with Mark during poker nights." I stared at her, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. "Explain." She hesitated again, looking down. "There were a few nights where the bets got personal. I didn't think much of it at first. Just harmless dares, little things. But then, a few months ago, Mark started making bets that involved Katie directly." I gritted my teeth. "Like what?" Allison shifted uncomfortably. "One time, he bet that if he won a hand, Katie had to sit on his lap for the next round." I clenched my fists under the table. "And she did it?" Allison gave me a pained look. "Yes." I felt my stomach churn. "And another time," she continued, "he won a bet where she had to whisper in his ear whatever he wanted. I don't know what he made her say, but she looked uncomfortable. And Mark just sat there grinning. I was going to be sick. I had spent years trusting Katie, thinking we were on the same page. And all this time, behind my back, she had been entertaining this? Letting some dirtbag treat her like part of the game? "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Allison let out a weak laugh. "Tell you when? In the middle of it? After?" I thought she told you." "I thought she must have, because why else would she be okay with it?" She shook her head. "But then, after the other night, after I saw your face when Mark said what he did, I knew you had no idea. And I felt sick for staying quiet." I exhaled slowly, my hands gripping the edge of the table. So this wasn't new. Katie had been pushing boundaries for months, slowly letting the game take control of her, and I had been completely blind to it. My wife, had been playing Mark's games. And she had never once told me. I stood up abruptly. Allison looked startled. "Henry. Thanks for telling me," I said stiffly. "But I need to go." I walked out of the cafe without another word. I knew what I had to do now. I was going home. And I was ending this. I packed my bag in silence. Katie stood in the doorway, trembling, her arms wrapped around herself like they were the only thing holding her together. "Please," she whispered. Don't do this. I zipped up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. You already did this, Katie. She shook her head frantically, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll change. I swear. No more poker. No more lies. Just, don't leave. I finally turned to face her. She looked desperate, but desperation wasn't enough. I had spent days trying to understand, trying to believe her, trying to see a way through this. But no matter how many times I replayed it in my head, I always came back to the same thing. She had gambled with our marriage. And she had lost. I can't stay married to someone I don't trust, I said quietly. Katie let out a shaky breath. Henry, I know I messed up. I was selfish, I was stupid. But I love you. I swallowed, my throat tight. I wanted to believe her. But love wasn't just words. It was choices. And she had made hers. Is there anything I can do to fix this? She begged. I exhaled slowly. No. She let out a broken sob, covering her face with her hands. I didn't stay to watch. I stepped past her, out the door, and into a world that no longer had her in it. The divorce wasn't messy. Katie tried to fight at first, begged for another chance, but I had nothing left to give. I moved into an apartment, changed my number, cut ties with everyone from the poker group. I didn't look back. Katie's life fell apart. I heard from a mutual friend that she quit poker, not because she wanted to, but because no one would play with her anymore. The group fractured after that night. No one trusted her. No one trusted each other. She had thrown everything away for a game that didn't even want her anymore. Months passed. Then one evening, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Katie was standing there. She looked different, thinner, worn down, but more real than I had seen her in years. The fire, the arrogance, the hunger for competition, it was all gone. I'm in therapy, she said softly. I've been trying to figure out why I did what I did. And I finally understand. I leaned against the doorframe. Yeah? And why's that? She gave a sad smile. I thought winning was the only thing that made me worth something. I thought if I lost, I was nothing. So I did whatever it took to keep playing, no matter who I hurt. She looked down. But I see now that I didn't just lose a game that night. I lost you. I swallowed hard, but I didn't speak. She took a shaky breath. I know I can't fix this. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But I just needed you to know that I understand now. And I'm sorry, Henry. For everything. Silence stretched between us. Then, after a moment, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded note. I wrote this for you. I hesitated before taking it. She lingered for a second, like she wanted to say more, but then she just nodded. Then she turned and walked away. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me. I stood there for a long time, staring at the note in my hand. Then I tossed it in a drawer, unopened. I didn't need to read it. I was already free.